Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our valuable audience. I'm pleased to introduce this new monthly webinar and could already see on the first poll, which is still ongoing, that the today topic will be exciting. Different answers, and this means also different understandings. And this is also what we will try to develop. As usual, as you can see, we will use the Mentimeter system, and you are able to ask questions. And also you will see there will be other questions to be answered where you will use this Menti tool. Don't forget to take the code at the top of this slide. Thank you. So to introduce, next slide, please. This new Quality Monthly webinar will be dedicated, as you could see, on the IRIS guidelines. Next slide, please. The IRIS guidelines is not something absolutely new. IRIS certification has started to develop this guidance already in 2011. At that time, we wanted to close some gaps between maybe new elements which are difficult to understand in the standard or in the process, and to give a help to the companies. So this is the idea at the beginning, and I think it remains until today. Next slide, please. So currently, since 2020, we have engaged a large updating work of the first guidelines, and we are about publishing new ones. So therefore, new topics will appear in the next weeks, all dedicated to the understanding the rail sector. And really this understanding and the right understanding, that's the key part, which of course will contribute to the application and an effective and an efficient application of the requirements by understanding them absolutely in the same sense that the writer of the standards and the rules and the rail sector needs. So this is all what we aim to convince you today, and therefore I will now introduce our speakers of today on the next slide. We will first have Jana Jung, the IRIS Development Manager, who will tell you a little bit what is a guideline and how we will create this. Then Marijke van den Bergen and Daniel Roth will explain some guidelines. Daniel on an existing one, maintenance, and Marijke on one which is almost ready for publication. She will tell you more about this, customer perception. Jana will also give you then again the status, what is already in the pipeline, what will come. And finally, Arthur will also show you how you can find it, how you can use the website, the IRQB website, to be clearly linked to the right place to discover that. So I will introduce as well the principle of the guidelines. Please, next slide. So in fact, what are the principles, what are the ideas we are following with these guidelines? But first, it's linked to an item which is really specific to the rail sector, or when it is not really specific, it's maybe a kind of different understanding or different interpretation we would like you to have in order to be in line with the expectations. Second is also that the difficulties which we are identified today, coming from the companies or coming from the assessment itself through the auditors, might also generate the redaction of a new guideline. Another point is that sometimes there are approaches which are quite complex in the management systems. And you will see, especially when you are in a small company or a medium company or a large company, and you will see there is currently something very nice on the way on that as well. Also, what is important is that we want also to clarify a standard application of some generic tools. And here I'm now thinking about the problem solving. Everybody has to solve problems, but in the rail sector, it's maybe likely that we have a common way in order that we have the understanding for all our customers or all our industries. Next slide, please. So about the content, very briefly, because here Jana will go much more deeper than me. We have standardized the structure in order to simplify the reading. You will never find a requirement in a guideline. No shall requirement, it's only a guidance. Of course, good or best practices, this is the main input we try to put in the guidelines. This means also that we need you, and here as well, Jana will go more deep in to write and to create these guidelines. It's not the team in Brussels who is writing the guideline, it's really the feedback and the experience of the members of the industry or the sector. We are trying to have as much as possible application examples to maximize the understanding. And of course, it's a real teamwork in the experts. And here also, our speakers later on will explain you on hand-on examples how the work is going on and how we are developing this. So next slide, please. What is also very important to know is that we are constantly monitoring the guideline as well, even when once published, in order to take into account improvements which might be addressed to us, or when there is an evolution of the state of art in the sector, which then is very interesting to be put in. Therefore, don't hesitate to communicate feedbacks, don't hesitate to share experiences, and so on. Another important point is that in some schemes, in some areas, there might be regulations which imposes some processes. So therefore, we also use the guidelines to explain a little bit how to implement this regulation in a certain way, or what are the differences towards the IRIS scheme or the IRIS assessment tool. A very good example is the maintenance way of working in Europe. And here, Daniel will give you much more examples. We will also present you today the detailed elements on one published guideline, as mentioned, and on one still under development, and the global view. So you will have a very generic view on all this. And therefore, on the next slide, let me summarize before giving the floor to the next speaker. The guidelines, it's a help for a better understanding for companies, but also for auditors, in order that they are at the highest level of understanding when they come to assess the companies, and also for the customers, of course. I have to admit that it's also a reservoir for new requirements, and therefore it's also necessary for us to update some guidelines, because some very nice ideas, some very good practices were taken in 2017 in the standard, because it became a state of art even in the organization. It's clearly developed at sector level, and not in Brussels, as mentioned. And of course, all this is available on our website, where Arthur will give you all the details at the end of this webinar. So now I will give the floor to Jana Jung, who will give you much more information about how to enter in the guideline world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bernard. On my presentation, I would like to show you the way from a guideline, from an idea to a guideline. So maybe we go on the next slide. Because here you can see the starting point. So generally it all starts at the regular IRQB meetings. There our members can, for example, raise the idea if they have found some difficulties in some issues to start the work on a guideline. But it could also be that, the decision is taken maybe after some discussions if there were issues that were maybe critical or anything like this. So as you see, the IRQB represents not only equipment manufacturers, but also system integrators and rail operators. So it is the whole rail sector that is participating in this. On the next slide, I will also show you how we are setting up the working groups. As Bernard already said, the guidelines are not written in Brussels, but they are written by dedicated working groups. So as soon as the decision is taken to prepare a guideline on a new topic, the different IRQB members can call some expert or some representatives that are then part of the working groups. So here you again see that we have quite a wide range of different companies that are participating in our working groups. On the next slide, I give you some general information. So as we already said, or as Bernard already had on one of his slides, it is always an advice for companies, not only those who are new to IRIS, but also those who are advanced in IRIS, on important topics. So it could be that there was a change in requirements and now something new has to be fulfilled, and these guidelines can really help and support you in your day-to-day life. Then the second important aspect is that the guidelines are no requirements. So they only give additional information and there will never be a requirement. So if you see anything in the guideline that is helpful for your organization, you can of course implement it. But if something is not matching in your day-to-day business, there's no need to implement this. And all our guidelines have a common structure. So if you have a look on them, you will see that there's always a common sense in them, that we explain the purpose of the guideline, the intentions, and we also always try to give some examples to make it as easy to implement as possible. Okay, on the next slide, we have the little kind of approval loop. So it all starts with the idea, as I already said. Then the working group is founded and they start to prepare and gather their feedback. So everyone from the IRQB members is able to announce a representative or an expert, and then all this information and all this experience is used to have the draft guideline. So it's not only one field of operation that is writing the guidelines, but we have many, many different representatives, and this is why the working group discussions can also be sometimes very interesting. Then, as soon as the guideline is finished by the working group members, it is always reviewed by the IRQB members. So not only the working group decides what will be the content of a guideline, but also the IRQB. And then finally, as we already had, it will be published on the IRQB website. Okay, maybe we go to the next slide. Here I have a little question on the Mentimeter. As you maybe know, we already published 3 guidelines, the one on special processes, one on maintenance, and one on KPIs. So maybe you can give me, very good, maybe you can give me some information if you already read those. So it is very nice to see that you are already familiar to our guidelines. And I guess this makes it clear why they are so important. Maybe we wait for a few seconds and then I would hand over back to Bernard.
Okay, very interesting ranking of the knowledge on the guidelines, and that shows as well that these topics are very interesting in such. So now I would like to hand over to Daniel Roth, and in fact he was the leader of the group writing the maintenance guideline, and maybe he can convince you to read it, as well as it's a little bit lower read than the others, maybe because you do not really understand what is in, and therefore Daniel will give you all the necessary explanations. Daniel, the floor is yours.
Yes, should turn on the micro. Thank you, Bernard, for handing over to me. Welcome to my presentation on the maintenance guideline. My name is Daniel Roth. I'm working with SBB, the Swiss Federal Railways in Switzerland, as Manager Quality and Compliance in the Rolling Stock Maintenance Department. To start on the next slide, I have a couple questions as well. I would like you to answer those, and we wait a couple seconds or minutes. Do you carry out maintenance? And did you know that the maintenance guide is available? And is it complete and understandable? When my interpretation is correct, then there are more people knowing that the maintenance guideline is available than companies doing maintenance. I don't know if my interpretation is correct, but this would be fine and very good if the maintenance and all the guidelines are really known. I think maybe we could go back at the very end of the presentation if time is left. I would like to go to the next slide. I will be talking about the IRIS guidelines in general, about maintenance, and some good to know. Next slide, please. The guideline supports the organization seeking for IRIS certification to understand the requirements and to implement all necessary measures for a successful certification. So it's a supporting tool. Next slide, please. How to write a guideline. We were delighted to work with colleagues from different areas, such as infrastructure component manufacturer from Spain, a brake component manufacturer from Hungary, ETCS component manufacturer from Germany. All of them do maintenance on their own parts and systems. In addition, 2 rail operators and ECMs from the Netherlands and from Switzerland, and a train maintainer from the UK were members of the working group. And a member of the IMC office in Brussels supported us. We first started with the existing maintenance guideline from 2012. We were the first one to revise the guidelines, but we realized then very soon that an existing structure of the guideline is not very helpful to the reader. Therefore, we decided then very quickly to restructure it according to the high-level structure of standards and adopt it to the structure of ISO TS 22/163. We then simply imported the structure, including the wording of the titles in the guideline. In addition, we consulted the IRIS certification rules for important topics, and we asked us, what would an auditor focus on? In which elements the applicant for certification faced problems? Where did they get corrective or improvement actions? Where were the weak points during the audits? And as Bernard told us already, when reading the ISO/TS, we focused on maintenance activities and then tried to figure out what kind of question an IRIS applicant would have had at this moment. What do I need to implement to fulfill the specific requirement? Doing that, we tried best to explain or to give examples. And it may seem like nitpicking, but correctly defined terms and definitions are the basis of language. It is important that everyone involved understands a question or a statement in the same way. If not, it can be disastrous. We tried as well to standardize and to visualize some requirements. I will explain this with the next slide, please. Next slide. The guideline contains standardized grids. Please read these grids the following way. I took here the example of project management. Is project management a knocking out criteria? Yes, it is. Does project management require a process or processes? Yes. Does it require a turtle? Yes. Does it require KPIs? They are recommended. And must it be documented? Yes. Indeed, it's a difficult example because project management is usually not applied in standard maintenance. Why? Because we don't need a project to determine that we need to grease the buffers or anything else. But as soon as we start refitting parts or refurbishing vehicles, the maintenance staff also works with projects. And at this time, we have to follow some rules. Next slide, please. A few words to the difficulties we face during our teamwork. IRIS was initially created by the industry, mainly for the manufacturers. Railway companies, operators as we are, and OEMs were dealing with maintenance in the past. The main objective is a safe fleet for a safe operation, and this over the life cycle, a period of 40 years or more. IRIS, or the ISO/TS, was created for manufacturers, not for maintainers. So it was sometimes very difficult to describe the maintenance requirements out of a manufacturer's standard. Next slide, please. In Europe, ECM is law. We must apply this. The working group had this situation in head and tried to explain the ISO/TS requirements together with the aspects of ECM in the guideline. An IRIS certification supports the implementation and maintenance of the validity of an ECM certificate and vice versa. In the Annex 2 of the guideline, ECM is explained in a few words. It contains a comparison between ECM and the IRIS certification rules, revision 3. The next slide, please. The IRIS guidelines support a better understanding. They have no requirements but explanations and some examples. And they are free of charge. You can just download them. They can be used for implementing a railway quality management system based on ISO 9001, even if no certification of IRIS is planned. They must probably be updated again when the new ISO 22163 standard will be launched and replacing the ISO TS 22163. So, next slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel, for this presentation and this insight in your work group. And I have again to thank you for leading this first group in 2019 to rework this important guideline, and also for the result achievements you got. Thank you for that. Now, let's go to another detailed approach on a guideline you do not know up to now, because the group is still working hard to fine-tune it. And you have here a presentation from Marieke van den Berger, who is in this working group, and will explain you why it takes a little bit long to develop it, because maybe the subject is difficult, or there are so many elements to take into account. She will tell it now. Marieke, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bernard, and hello and welcome also from my side. I work as Supplier Development Manager for the department at SNCB, the Belgian National Railway Operator. As co-leader of the IRQB working group on customer perception, I would like to give you a first insight on the new guideline. This guideline is work in process, as Bernard told you, and publication is foreseen next summer. As all guidelines, this document contains recommendations on good practices and methods. It's not to be considered as mandatory requirements. Next slide, please. In the previous IRQB webinar, customer satisfaction was discussed, and Bernard summarized why customer satisfaction is so important. If you want to improve the customer satisfaction, you first need to capture the perception that your customers have of your company. Next slide, please. Now, what do we want to explain in this guideline? First of all, to help you to understand the requirements, we explain how this is evaluated for the IRA certification and quality performance levels. Secondly, we dive into the application of the requirements and give you plenty of examples. Lastly, we give advice on how to use the outputs of customer perception, which is, for me, the key topic of this guideline. On the next slide, we take a closer look into the understanding of the requirements. As you know, a stakeholder analysis is required by ISO 9001. This is not only about listing your customers, it is also about your impact on them and their impact on your company. In the guideline, we give examples of questions that can help you define this impact. An example is, can this customer have a very substantial impact on my cash flow? The second topic is customer feedback. This is really key to operators and system integrators. We need this channel of information as a lever to switch from second-party audits to third-party audits. Finally, the last topic is KPIs. The required KPIs are customer satisfaction, customer on-time delivery, and non-conformities raised by the customer. It's important to see these KPIs from the perspective of the customer. You may think that an OTD of 95% is excellent, but your customer may think that 95% is just not good enough. Next slide, please. In this chapter, we want to give guidance on roles, inputs, methods, outputs, timing to all types of readers. Not only large suppliers with a whole network of employees involved, but also small and medium-sized companies. Not only companies that are certified since long, but also new applicants that want to find their way in this great adventure of certification. Not only companies with lots of customers, but also companies with only one or a couple of internal customers. As readers of this guideline, we want not only the suppliers in the rail supply chain, but also the customers in the rail supply chain, how they, as a customer, can help improve and develop their suppliers. Next slide, please. Managing customer perception should not be done just for the beautiful eyes of the IRIS auditor. It really should be the cornerstone of your business. And not only on a day-to-day basis, but especially in taking strategic decisions on middle and long term. Next slide, please. So this was a short introduction to the new guideline. Now I would like you to go to the Mentimeter platform and type in any other topics that you would want to add in this guideline. No suggestions yet? Very good. Examples for surveys. Nice to see that. Any other suggestions? Leadership. Yes, in the roles. This is very important indeed. Any other items you would like to see? Example of KPI. Yes, that's also a good one. Nice to see the words coming in. Very nice input. Okay, thank you very much for this input. We have 2 more sessions of the working group planned to finish the guideline and to take into account your input. Next slide, please. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the members of the IRQB Working Group 9 for their valuable contributions. Fanny, Inigo, Roberto, Tamara, Volker, Walter, Waldemar, Yasunari, and last but not least, the co-leader of this working group, Weert. Thank you so much for the co-creation of this guideline. Without you, this would not have been possible. So that was it from my side. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, please write them in the Mentimeter and I will answer later on in the Q&A part. And it's now my pleasure to hand over the floor again to Jana.
Yes, thank you. So now that we have heard something about the guidelines that are published or in preparation, I would also like to give you a little overview about the other guidelines that are in preparation at the moment, because we have 3 additional working groups that are working on new guidelines or on updated guidelines, and I would like to show you on the next slide one of those. So the first one is a little guideline for small and medium enterprises that want to become IRIS certified. As I have shown on my last slides, the members of the working groups are always the IRQB members. Of course, this is then a bit difficult to have also the experience of a small or medium enterprise, and this is why in this case we also had working group members that were not part of the IRQB, but that gave us very, very interesting feedback how IRIS can be implemented in smaller or medium-sized enterprises. So we collected a quite high number of examples and really practical advices on topics such as safety and quality policy, the business planning, the contingency planning, the monitoring and measuring devices, or the process reviews. Because we had in this working group the feedback also from the SQA departments of the IRQB members that small and medium enterprises are sometimes struggling with the very, very specific requirements of the IRIS certification scheme. Sometimes they are not only delivering to the rail sector, and this is why they are not that familiar to these requirements. So we really tried in a hard and long working period to collect as many examples and also as easy examples as possible to be able to provide them to all small and medium enterprises who are also interested in becoming IRIS certified. Hopefully this guideline will be published very soon, as we are already in our final draft version. On the next slide, there is another topic that I guess is sometimes a bit struggling for companies to become IRIS certified, and this is the project management. So for project management, there was also a working group set up that discussed quite hard how the requirements of project management can be fulfilled in companies where there is no real project management. I guess the example given by Daniel was already very good, and some of you also felt familiar with this. This is why there was first a clustering of organizational activities in project management, and then we allocated the different applicable IRIS certification rules to this kind of company types. Hopefully this guideline will also be finished soon, and then it is also available on the IRQB website for download. A third guideline that is currently under revision is the one for problem solving. Here we are also working on an update to give you the possibility to have an up-to-date version of this guideline and also of different methods for problem solving. On my next slide, I would like you also to give us maybe some ideas for future guidelines. So where do you see a need, for example, for a new guideline that should be worked on? Because I guess there's nothing to improve. I guess there are some topics where we can have new guidelines. Okay. Yeah, change management. I guess this is a quite good example. We also have one guideline for configuration and change management, and this will also be updated as soon as the other ones are published. I see some really very specific topics that need to be perfect. So I see configuration management is one of the topics that is in your mind. As I already said, the old guidelines will also be updated just as the ones for problem solving. So hopefully we can give you an answer on this soon. We will keep all this information you wrote us, and we will consider them for our future guidelines. By this, I would thank all of you and hand over back to Bernard.
Thank you, Jana. Thank you as well, Mareike, for this view on the current work, what is on the way. As already mentioned by Jana, there are some guidelines still to be updated from the one published in 2012-13, such as configuration and change management and obsolescence management and so on. The IRQB board will put the resources to update all the guidelines by end of the year latest. So then we will have an update of all that shortly. So now I would like to hand over to Arthur, who will tell you a little bit where to find the documents and how you can access to that, and a little bit also about the IRQB website itself. Arthur, the floor is yours.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone from Brussels, where unfortunately the sun has been replaced by clouds, but this is okay. I will be sharing with you today where you can find IRIS guidelines and how to stay updated and get the most recent information. I will be sharing my screen with you. I don't have slides. I will be showing you this directly on the IRQB website. So once you go and make your way to irqb.org, to find the guidelines, what you should do is go to the publications section. So if you click on the publications section, you will see the guidelines. All guidelines that are published are listed then under the section called guidelines. The page also includes some other publications that might be also interesting for you, but for the guidelines, then the first section here. What to keep in mind is that the IRQB guidelines are published, the guidelines on the IRQB website are published exclusively here. So this means that do not go and look for them from the IRIS portal or somewhere else. They are only here. So whenever you're thinking, is this guideline already published or not? It's a good idea to come here because this is the place where all the published ones are available. If you click on any of these, it will open up the PDF document, and if you want to then download this to your computer, you can do so and have the PDF on your computer. So you are, of course, free to use these. These guidelines are free of charge. However, I would like to remind you that these guidelines are copyright protected. This means that you should not use these guidelines for commercial purposes. So like translating it and selling it or something like that. If you are a consultant and you have trainings and you want to use these documents, then please make sure to contact us before you do so. This is where you find the guidelines. They are all published here, but how to stay updated, how to know when a new guideline has been published. A good idea would be to subscribe to our mailing list, because our mailing list is let's say the main source of information where we always share when we publish a new guideline. We will always be sending out an email about that. How to subscribe to the IRQB mailing list is if you go to the IRQB bulletin menu item. If you click on that, then on that page you will find a subscription form. If you fill it in, you're added to the list and you get all the mailings from us. That also includes the IRQB bulletins themselves, which might also include important information about the guidelines too. Like, for example, in our last year's edition, June 2020 edition, we also published an article about guidelines. So so that's also a good source of information. So it's a good idea to subscribe yourself to stay updated. Where we also share information about new guidelines are our social media channels. So IRQB is active on LinkedIn. So if you search IRQB, the International Radio Quality Board, you will find us on LinkedIn, and we will absolutely certainly be sharing the new guidelines that we publish also here. So we'll be letting you know through that channel as well as Twitter. If you're active on Twitter, feel free to also follow us here because that's where we also publish information on the guidelines. Additionally, to get more information, to stay updated, I suggest you every now and then also check our news section on the IRQB website. So this includes all the news that we have, the articles, but also information about the guidelines. So here again, I will just, as an example, show you an article about KPI guideline that was published last year. So whenever we publish a new guideline, we will also be publishing a news article on the website, so you will find it from the news section as well. And finally, you can also stay updated by attending our events, because whenever we have some big news to share, we are also going to do that at our own events. To learn more about events, go to the events section on our website, where you can see all the upcoming and past IRQB events where we have been to or what that we are organizing. So yeah, whenever you maybe didn't have time to attend an IRQB event, you can also come here to see the recordings and to get all the information about the event. So here, for example, the latest IRQB webinar that took place last month, the recording and all the information is available here. So I hope that that this overview was useful for you. In case you have any questions or suggestions, you can also always contact us. You will find the contact details under the contact section. So here you will find the contact details for the IRQB coordinator, Bernard Kaufmann, or you can also write to our general email address with your ideas or questions that you might have. If they are specifically about communication, you can also feel free to contact me. My contact details are in the events section under every event. So I hope this short overview gave you an idea where to look if you want to know if a new guideline has been published. My main suggestion for you would be to subscribe to the IRQB mailing list that you can do through the red, green button here, and follow us on our social channels. So thank you very much for this, and I would now hand the floor back to Bernard.
Thank you, Arthur, for this presentation of the website and to help the people to find quickly the guidelines. It's time now to go to the questions. We got several questions for our speakers, and I will now be the speaker for these questions and address it directly. So the first question is addressed to Mareike. It's as follows: small suppliers get feedback from customers, but from numerous actors, quality managers, purchasers, technicians, etc. Could big customers help structuring this?
Yes, indeed. In the guideline, we will be giving examples of how you can structure this, and also on which roles can be important in customer perception. It's not a good idea to just select, I only want to get the input from the quality manager or from the purchaser. It's from all those people that as a supplier you want to get the feedback from your customer, because it's treating the different aspects of you as a supplier towards your customer.
Okay, Mareike, but can you tell us what were the main challenges, for instance, in your group customer perception?
The main challenge in my group of customer perception was we had a lot of ideas, a lot of expertise, but writing it in a way that it is also understandable for people that are not experts. For example, for companies that seek certification. That was the biggest challenge for us in the working group, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. By the way, I got as well in the question some ideas, additional ideas for new topics. One is linked to the organizational knowledge. So Jana, you might take this into account, and as well, one person thinks that a guideline would be helpful to help companies implementing ISO TS 22163 in harmony with other quality management standards like IRTF, EN 9100 with the cross-reference tables and comparison of the terminologies and technologies and so on, which might be as well a very interesting topic to be taken and to be discussed then in the boards for implementation. Then I have another question for you, Jana, here, which is, will the new guideline cover the different approaches for small, medium and large organizations, and about where you stand in the supply chain as a component, subsystem, car builder and so on?
Yes, I can say especially for the project management guideline, this will be considered. As I said, we clustered the different fields of activities for different companies, and I guess this is the best way to focus or to take into account the different possibilities of companies that want to become certified. And also maybe for an already published guideline, for example, the guideline for KPIs, that is also considered that we have special examples for guidelines clustered in easy examples or easy to implement examples, middle examples, and maybe some more advanced examples. So this also takes into consideration, for example, the company size.
Thank you, Jana. Now I have a question to Daniel. Daniel, the question is, how do you see the coordination for a company between the ECM regulation and an IRIS certification be awarded in a company?
Yes, in the working group, we found that we spoke a long time on that subject. We saw that IRIS is covering a lot, about 75% of the requirements in ECM. So if a company has an IRIS certificate, it helps to ECM and as well vice versa, of course. If someone is ECM certified, what we all need to be as ECMs and rail operators in the future, then it would be much easier to get a certification on IRIS. And I guess this helps as well in the understanding for small companies as well. It is a difficulty in ECM as well to explain to small companies why do they need to implement such a sophisticated system. And I guess that all the IRIS requirements would help to implement ECM as well.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Then I have questions about timeline. And here, Jana, maybe you can tell us a little bit more. One question about how long it takes to prepare a guideline, because sometimes people are a little bit expecting the outputs. And also, is there a kind of release schedule for the upcoming one in the next month?
Yeah. So maybe regarding the first question, how long it takes to write such a guideline, maybe I explain it in the following way. We started most of the working groups in autumn last year. So the one for customer perception, the one for the small and medium enterprises, and the one for project management. And we expect to publish them in the summer 2021. So depending on the topic that needs to be considered, it can take a bit longer. And at the moment, it is also only possible to perform these working group meetings online. But we found a quite good schedule that we meet every 4 weeks, or in some working groups, we meet even every 2 weeks. So it takes some time to collect all the information, to collect all the feedback, and also come to a common agreement in the guidelines that every working group member also could give his opinion. And regarding the second question, as I said, most of the guidelines will be published now in the summer, one after the other. And as you also said before, the old guidelines that were already published a bit longer ago, they will be updated hopefully by the end of this year.
Okay, thank you, Jana. There are two last questions, but I will try to answer them directly. The first is the follow: will the ARIS audit tool be updated to reflect the new guidelines? That's a very interesting subject indeed, because we are regularly updating our tool, and the next release of the audit tool is planned for end of July. And end of July, of course, the published guidelines, as far as they are references to the guideline, will be included automatically. This means that, yes, we will add it progressively when there is a release for the audit tool. The second and the last question I will take for today is a little bit complementary to what Jana just said about the fact that we need help to write it. And the question is, if why no CBs or consultants are part of the working group? In fact, it's not totally true, because I mean, in the past we used to have auditors in the working group. For instance, the first release of the configuration and change management guideline was led by an auditor. So it depends really on the topic, on the expertise, the necessary expertise. We have also in two guidelines which are currently in work, we had the help of students which were working on this and having, I would say, a more academic approach for writing and bringing the information. So this means that it's not closed at all, I would say, regarding the expertise, but it is assessed at the board level about the need and the added value for this in all the cases. And of course, we need also to take into account the size of the groups, because I mean, if you have groups with 20-25 people, of course, it's much more difficult to write it. And we try to have quite fit groups, and rather to publish a first document, and then maybe, as I mentioned at the beginning, having a monitoring to review it regularly in order to include also the new state of art. So that's it for the questions. Thank you for all these questions. Now we are almost on time, and I would, of course, to finish and to close this webinar, to thank all of you for your attendance. I would again remind you that you can watch it again if you have not understood everything, or if you had to go out of the webinar for a certain time, or to tell it to your colleagues that they can watch it. Arthur just showed you where to find the video where you can have a look again. And as well as usual, I would like to invite you to block the date on your calendar for the next Quality Monthly, which is scheduled on the 9th of July. Then we will have a short break of in August, but July we will still be there. The topic will be focused on the analysis of ARIS benefits over the years. More details soon in the invitation, which will be sent out by Arthur. And therefore, now I would like to wish you a nice end of the day, or even the evening for those who are already at that time schedule, and also a nice weekend, and hope to have you again on the 9th of July present for the next Quality Monthly. Thank you as well for all the speakers for their valuable presentations and work to prepare all this, and participation in the working groups for the guidelines as well. Thank you. Bye-bye.